Welcome to Emotion Ships, where we talk about the real reason everything happens for a reason. I am your host, Charlie Carroll, along with my compassionate co-host, Mallory Redmond. Now,
Are you trying to butter me up or what's happening?
welcome to the program. Welcome to episode 29. Welcome to the program, Mal.
Hi, thanks.
How was your evening? Did you watch a little bit of the first ever Democratic online convention?
I did not.
Oh, I did. I like tuning in, watching these things.
I'm sure.
Online was probably not the best thing to say. Virtual, that's the word they were using.
Yes.
The first virtual Democratic convention. I did tune in. I like hearing from both sides. Why are you smiling?
I'm just listening.
There was something to that smile.
Did you watch Michelle Obama's?
I did.
Oh.
I don't know. I'm a little disappointed in politics, although just in general these days.
These days? What do you mean?
Well, yeah, you're right. I don't know. I don't think it's a winning strategy when all you do is talk about the negative side of the other party. Like, I think I've never ran a political party, and I know you do have to point out some of the things that you disagree with the other side. But my thing, and you know this from our organizations that we work in, is promoting the upside of what can be versus the downside of what's not. And go back. You should go back and listen to it. I just thought there was way too much downside of what's not versus.
Welcome to politics, my friend. And that's why I don't.
Sure.
I remain informed in the ways that I choose to, but
Sure.
I don't get too deep into it because of that.
Yes.
It doesn't do anything good for my mental health or energy.
No, and that's the thing. You really do have to be on guard and prepare yourself for tuning into something like that, because literally the energy, talking about energy here at Emotion Ships, the podcast, is super negative.
Oh yeah. I would hate, I don't watch a ton of just like regular TV, but I remember before the 2016 election, Darren and I would have the TV on, and I would have to mute the commercials because they were so intense. The political commercials, like it really was like not good for me to hear.
For sure.
It's the same thing over and over, but it was just, you felt so like you couldn't escape it. Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess you could just turn off the TV.
We said a couple of episodes ago, I should finish that, that government can't be the problem unless it's the solution. And I think, there's a great general principle here when it comes to this idea that people get worked up, right? Like when you watch that and you get really worked up and energetic and, you're angry and you're commenting back to the TV as if it can hear you.
Yes.
It shows you that you have put weight and energy into believing that those people are watching out for you or can make your life better or worse.
Yeah.
And so,
well, and I mean, they know how to tap into like some of the commercials that I'm remembering from the last election were a nominee who was talking about women's bodies in like very graphic and terrible ways. And so that is not just, that like gets to me on several levels. That's not just about like their politics. It becomes a little bit more personal.
I saw a cartoon this morning in the sketch or one of those cartoons in the newspaper this morning where a deer is looking at the sign, that is very traditional here in the United States of a deer crossing, on the side of the road. And the caption was something like, "Can we quit projecting these perfect bodies?" It was pretty funny.
Okay. I feel like I don't really get it.
Well, the deer on the ground was heavier and did not have the silhouette of the deer on the sign.
Okay. Okay, I'm with you now.
I thought of that when you said what you said. But, this is an emotion ship when it comes to power and really being taken care of in provision that we can all learn from. One of the ways to know that you've been hooked and you're relying upon an exterior or an outer source for internal provision or peace is by watching how upset you get around certain things. The office of the president has a lot of power, but at the end of the day, there are checks and balances no matter who is in office and who's controlling the Senate and who's controlling Congress, that they don't have as much power as we would think over the individual's life. Like a lot of us listening to this podcast have an opportunity to wake up each and every day and to go make the world a better place and to take control of our life and make decisions that further our passion and purpose, and hopefully that revolves around making other people's lives better. But when we find ourselves getting upset by another person's comments, whether it's through politics or somebody that we're sitting next to or probably a family member, you've given them the permission to do that, right? When we're super upset because of another person's words, we say all of the time here on the podcast that words mean nothing and everything at the same time. That, the word dog or God or pizza or whatever it is actually means nothing. We have to make it come alive based on how we think or feel about that. So when someone that, we don't know or we don't give a lot of credit to says, "You're so stupid," we don't even think twice about it. But when there's someone in our life that we feel like we need to win their influence or they need to have a good opinion about us and they say, "You're so stupid," then our world falls apart, right? And what people often don't realize when it comes to energy work is that though there are a lot of exterior sources out there that can throw your life off course or influence your life positively or negatively, you still have to give them permission to do that. You still have to give them the power to do that. And so, some of the names that we mention on this podcast regularly are names like Einstein or Nelson Mandela. And Nelson Mandela is a perfect example, or Corrie ten Boom and other people that have been through very hard situations in their life. They realized that no matter where they were, they still had a choice to either allow their life to be driven from the inside out or the outside in. And the people that struggle to find their purpose or in pursuing their passion in life are the people that make a lot of their internal realities, their sense of peace, their sense of provision, based on things outside, right? And so it just comes back to the longer we live, the more we have an opportunity to transition our sense of security. And this is talked about by Jesus in the book of Matthew, like where you build the foundation of your life on, like the shifting sand or on the rock. It really comes back to who we give power to, who we enable and give power to. And there are just so many examples of two different people that were in the exact same situation, but responded to it differently. And the one that responded to it, not letting their outside circumstance overwhelm them or keep them down, got out of that situation, whereas the other person did not.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with you. I think there is a balance of some righteous anger, I guess I would call it. He's opening his beer, you guys.
It's not a beer, ladies and gentlemen. It's San Pellegrino.
Dear San Pellegrino, would you like to sponsor us?
I don't know what vintage this is.
Okay, but I think because there's a lot of crazy stuff that's happening in the world, and so if we just are not impacted by it, or just, I think it can get a little. You can get a little bit too much on the side of ignorance, or just like not. We are meant to be moved by the injustices that we see, and I don't think that needs to steal our peace, but it should shake us up a little bit and move us to action.
But you're no good. You're absolutely no good, and cannot help other people if you don't put your mask on first. And so what I'm addressing from an energetic standpoint is even to see these injustices and to be moved by them, which, just using Jesus as a standard right now, like he cried, when he saw the injustices or the things that other people were dealing with. And we are to be moved to that extent when it comes to seeing the needs that others have. But that can only happen when we have a correct posture toward the difficulties that we're facing in our own life and what makes us who we are. And so there are a lot of people that are waking up with an abundant amount of anxiety and stress these days because they've based too much of their sense of well-being on exterior things versus an internal reality. You know, going back to the special episode last week of going back to school and the quote that we read from C.S. Lewis, you know, what he hits on writing back in the 1940s there is like something like this pandemic comes along and we act as if, you know, we're not going to die or that this has not been the story of mankind. The risk of death, the risk of having our life taken, the risk of injustices, all of those things. Like those are things that have been happening ever since the history of mankind. And in order for us to be people that run to the fires and help others, we've got to be healthy ourselves. And that starts with not building the foundation of our well-being around the opinion or need for approval or a certain level of any resource internally to feel good about our life. And that's, you know, you've heard me ask a lot, what makes a good day good? And so many of us, though we would never say it, or maybe we've never thought about it, would say that a good day is often defined by the absence of bad. And that's just, it can't be that way because we're all, especially if you're an overachiever and you're trying to push as hard as you can to make a difference in other people's lives, like you're going to experience a tremendous amount of adversity and you need to. Mm-hmm. And so if what makes a good day good is the absence of bad, you're screwed.
Yep.
You know, and so I think that one of the reasons why so many people are not running to other people is because they're not healthy themselves. And I've got to feel a certain way about my life in order to get out there and make a difference in other people's lives. And what I've learned is that you can acknowledge that you have feelings about your life, but in a lot of ways and at a lot of times, those feelings can be divorced from what you're doing and who you know yourself to be and what you know your life to be about. Mm-hmm. Again, feelings are great servants if you get them to listen to you, but they're horrible masters if you find yourself listening to them.
Agreed. I'm not biting.
Oh, there's nothing to bite on.
Oh, there always is.
Well, what are you tempted to bite on? Because I'm not.
Well, I just see you get worked up about quite a bit of things, and so
go ahead, go on, give an example.
Well,
what do you?
Going back to school.
Yeah.
Masks.
Yeah.
California taxing the rich.
Yes, that is an article that I have up here. California is set to pass the nation's first wealth tax targeting the ultra rich. Well, it's just stupid. That's what it is. It's just stupid. Because a lot of these people, whether it be Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, not all, but a lot of these people are already doing things and spending their money on people in situations like, look at Bill Gates with what he has been doing with some of the COVID vaccines. And I know someone would say, well, I've researched that and he's made a lot of money off of that. Well, that's a potential reality too. What we can't get into is censoring or controlling everyone's behavior and taking a system, you know, again, which goes back to 2 episodes again, capitalism versus socialism. Everything that is great in life has an equal opportunity to be misused to a great extent. The greater the opportunity or the greater the purpose of that is, like sex, the greater it can be misused. And we can't get away from that. And the answer, and we see this in politics, is not to elect the opposite party of the current abuser to have them come in and dictate and tell people how they're going to live their life because we can't trust people. When we get into leadership, we accidentally get led into believing that we were elected to think for people. And a general response from humanity throughout the course of humanity is when we see things that we don't like, that are coming from an open platform or a community or a nation where people have been given the power to think for themselves and make decisions for themselves, that we want to remove the possibility of negative consequences, but you can't. I mean, from a biblical standpoint, even looking at Adam and Eve in the garden, though God outnumbered the good trees to the bad tree with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the middle, evil still had to exist in order for good to exist. Darkness still had to exist for light to exist, which is an interesting thing to work through, with God being the creator of all things, creating the possibility for evil so that the possibility for good could exist, and then giving people an opportunity to choose. What I, just using this article as an example, with California set to pass the nation's first wealth tax, is this is traditional humanity saying that we don't like some of the negative consequences that come from giving people an opportunity to choose. But then those are the same people that come back and say, well, the woman's body is the woman's body, and if she wants to choose to take the baby's life or the fetus's life, they can do that. And so you can't have it both ways. And that's why I've talked about in the past that though I am pro-life, if I were a political candidate, I would not make that a political thing. I would say that you still have to give people the opportunity to choose life or to choose death. And I infuriate people when I say that. But again, it just comes back to God has not taken away everything that is good just because bad can come from it. And I see this in politics all the time. And I see it with parents. I see it with pastors. I see it with politicians. We get into leadership and we think that our job is to now think for people. Like, look this past week at the Big Ten saying that these players are not going to play football. In my opinion, that's not their choice. If the players want to take on the risk in light of baseball coming back, in light of the NFL playing, in light of NHL playing, in light of some of the other college football conferences playing, I don't think that is their choice. Just because something bad can happen doesn't mean we should take out the whole opportunity for people to choose, in Charlie's opinion, especially in light of the statistics that are out there for people at those ages.
You bypassed the entire reason that I brought up the California tax, but that's fine.
No,
Let's
give
move
it to
on.
me.
I already did.
What was the reason? Don't assume I'm that smart.
Well, sometimes I think you get really worked up and I wonder if your mask is on, so to speak. Usually
my mask
using
is
the
on?
analogy that you got to put your mask on first.
Yeah, well,
It seems like things like this can get you riled up to the point where I wonder if it's taking just a little sliver of peace from you.
No, absolutely not. Because then I can go on and live my life the rest of my day and focus on the things that I can control and I can't control. I'm a little bit of an antagonist sitting in this chair in this role. Yes.
Nobody believes that.
That's what I'm doing. I am serving my role here at Emotionships, the podcast, as an antagonist trying to help people think.
I was being sarcastic.
No.
Maybe people don't know that. I know that.
No. Well, you have your poker face on today, so.
I'm the antagonist to the antagonist.
Yes. I was watching a show this morning.
That's weird.
Fixer Upper on HGTV.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding.
How random is that?
Well, it's not random in that we had that on the television at Table 33 this morning.
Oh, okay.
And
I'm envisioning you like laying in bed watching Fixer Upper first thing in the morning. Got you. Okay. It was at the restaurant.
Yeah, I was at the restaurant and I was getting my cortado and I was watching that show and it just reminded me how much I love shows like that.
Oh my gosh, they're so good. The before and after.
Yeah.
I love makeover shows.
Yeah, it's just, you see the like drywall all over the place and the spackle and all of that stuff. And I just love every part of that because you know something good is coming.
Yeah.
And for me, it's kind of like the sensation of scratching a scab off of your arm, like getting rid of the old and the new skin is there. Like, it's just, I don't know. I'm a little compulsive. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And to see, you can see this house that hasn't been given attention for a long time, and 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, sometimes longer than that, it was in its prime, and then it was neglected because it wasn't the most popular thing. And then you have someone that comes in whose orientation is that of hope and optimism, and they see what a lot of us cannot see.
Mm-hmm.
And so they walk through the house and they figure out which walls are load-bearing walls and which walls are going to be able to come out, and what they can do on the ceiling and what they can put in, how they can paint the fireplace and all of these things. And then you get to watch the redemption or the transformation, the resurrection happen, which probably took them a matter of months. You get to see it in minutes as it unfolds throughout that hour. And it's just, it's so rewarding. And it's why I think shows like Extreme Home Makeover went so well. And they kind of, ABC and Extreme Home Makeover, or was that what it was called? I know it was Home Makeover, but
I think so. There was the word extreme in there.
Yeah. They connected it, right? And then they started finding people whose lives needed a transformation.
Yeah, and they would like pay the mortgage and everything.
Yeah, and they would tie it into the home being transformed.
Yeah.
And they just connected what we all sensed and felt in the first place, and that is this love of comeback stories and seeing things that, have been passed over or are no longer in their prime come back to life. And so I was watching that this morning, and it just reminded me, like, I love being around renovation projects.
Mm-hmm.
Just all across the board. I enjoy it. I like watching it slowly come to life, and even just imagining it when you walk through, like, what it could be.
Yeah. It definitely, I don't think I have the eye for that kind of things. I'm happy to support people who have the eyes. I think that's kind of been my role, but like, I think you have the eye for what could be in a space.
Yeah.
Like okay. So an example is at the restaurant.
Yes.
That you own, you said, I think we need to paint the walls black. And I was like, what are you talking about? That's a terrible idea. It's going to feel like death in here. Yeah. And it's like amazing.
Yeah.
It expanded the place and it looks really good, but I can't do that. I don't have the vision for that.
Yeah. Well, I think people have different gifts, right? And I'm a little more of that visionary, and it's probably why I love working with people, and we're doing what we're doing here at City Church, and then also through the Miami Valley Life Alliance, is just seeing people come back to life. And the other thing about it that really transfers over in the analogy is how dirty and messy everything is in the process. That it's not as dirty when you see the home, it's just outdated. And then as you try to go from where it is to where it needs to be or where it can be, it gets really, really messy.
Mm-hmm. Is Fixer Upper the one with Chip and Joanna?
Yes.
Yeah. What I love about them is they seem to have so much fun, though, like during the process, that it doesn't have to be all, I think a lot of times transformation can feel really like painful and like a lot of work, and they seem to really I mean, that's part of Chip's
now
thing,
now they're starting their own network, I think I heard.
Yes, they have quite an empire.
Well, yeah, and I think one of the primary reasons why is because they've learned to have fun and enjoy it versus agonize over it.
Yeah. I agree.
And so the same thing is true when it comes to personal renovation. If you're listening to this podcast and you're struggling and you feel defeated and you've been staring at the same situation for maybe a decade or two now, there is hope, for change, that you can change and you can be, just because you're 40, 50, 60 years old and you've never had that sense of purpose and been thrilled with your life. Like, you just need to find the right people to come beside you and help you get through the initial phases of developing a plan and then mapping it out so you can get going. I mean, there is, no matter who you are or what you've been through, there is hope for you to find a level of life that you're thrilled with, that gets you up and out of bed each and every morning. And so I just really enjoy those shows because it communicates a much broader message to me. Like I love the smell of renovation in the air, whether it's in a person's life or in a home like that. It's just phenomenal. I was thinking about this a little bit this morning. I am sleeping like a kid.
Okay.
Which is
Wait, is that good or
insane.
bad? What age kid are you referring to?
Yeah, let's say 13.
Oh, okay. So that's good.
Definitely not 1 or 2.
Yeah, right.
Which, when people say I slept like a baby.
It's stupid.
Yeah. You of all people know this right now. But yeah, I haven't slept well for about 10 to 12 years since I hurt my back in a CrossFit accident, which I was just spotting someone and they dumped a bunch of weight on me and I tore a disc in my lower back.
Do you think it was intentional?
No, definitely not. She was going for a PR and totally fell backwards and I was there spotting her. It was not good. It was not pretty. But that being said, we got a new medical director at Body Garage Dayton, and I did a blood test for her to look at my hormone levels. Mm-hmm. And she said, the traditional person interprets your hormone levels between a very wide range. Like testosterone is something like, between 300 and 800. And I think I came in around 500 or 550, which is well in the quote unquote healthy range. Mm-hmm. And our medical director said, you need to come see me at my office and let me treat you because that's not thriving. That number 500 or 550 is not thriving. We can change that a little bit and you'll feel the difference. And so I went to her office and had a series of tests, and she ended up putting pellets in my side, testosterone pellets.
Totally normal.
Just doing a little biohacking. I'm telling you what, it is absolutely insane because your hormones are produced in the body to regulate your energy and to keep you moving forward in life. And so when you're younger, you have more of certain hormones, and then the older you get, depending upon how you treat your body, certain categories can fall down, and then it's very hard to get them back up. And so this happened a little over a week ago, maybe 10 days ago, and I just feel absolutely phenomenal.
You know what's crazy is you are the third person within a week who has gotten this kind of blood testing done.
Yeah.
I have 2 girlfriends who live in completely different areas of the country and different from this area of the country. And they have gone, I think they went on the same day. They don't know one another. It's just, I think this is like a thing. This is becoming more of a thing.
But the thing about it is people want to feel good.
Yeah.
And so what I did not expect, I expected to have more energy from these testosterone pellets, and Amy did it too. Obviously it's different amounts because women don't need as much as...
Hopefully that's obvious to people,
right.
But yes.
You'd be surprised. But the 2 biggest benefits that I've experienced thus far is I literally feel like I'm a teenager again with how I'm sleeping. And after you haven't slept well for 10 to 12 years, it's a game changer.
For sure.
It's amazing. And then the second thing would be my little aches and pains are just gone. And so it was a very simple procedure that lasted 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. So it was very simple. Mm-hmm. And it lasts 6 months. So they put enough pellets in your side, just like in your love handle, that it will last 6 months. And if you're listening and you struggle with energy or sleeplessness, or you just don't have a lot of vitality, you can go to bodygaragedayton.com or talk to us at Body Garage. Drive in and talk to us, and they will hook you up with our medical director, and you can it's a saliva test to see where your hormone levels are and where your gut health is. And there's no amount of money that should keep you from just feeling great.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's a tough statement for some people.
True. You'd be surprised at the cost when it comes to, a lot of us don't understand where we're spending our money in the first place. And so there are always creative ways to not spend money in certain areas and come back and spend them in others. Or maybe you have to save up for a while to be able to do it. And that's fine too. I have always been a big believer in there are a lot of opportunities out there. You just need to ask. You need to figure out and not be ashamed about going to the right people and saying, hey, is there any work that I can do for you on the side? Here's something that I'm working toward. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of great people out there that understand that because they've been there too in their life. And this happens on a regular basis with me and some of our employees that will come and say, hey, is there any way that I could get an advance because this is something that I want to do? Yeah. Hey, I'm looking to start my own business. Would you be interested in funding it? Anytime I have the opportunity to do that and I can afford to do that, I'm going to do it because I know what it feels like to be there. And it doesn't take a crazy amount of money to be able to do some of these things. I also have in the queue on Instagram a post from a billboard I took a picture of, 2 pictures. One is a billboard north of Dayton where it's 2 sausage egg sandwiches from McDonald's for $2. So a buck a piece for a sausage and egg sandwich from McDonald's. Mm-hmm. And then the other one is for a 99-cent cheese coney hot dog. And it's just like, we don't understand, and the caption is something like, that's the most expensive meal you'll ever eat. Right? Because a lot of our hormones are regulated by what they have to work with or not work with in the body. And so, one of the unfortunate things about the FDA being responsible for drugs and food is that profit is still controlling our approach to food and how we distribute it throughout this country and what we make readily or easily available. And it's an absolute crime that you can get 2 sausage egg sandwiches for $2, but if you want something healthy, it's going to cost you $10 to $12. And I'm not about getting rid of McDonald's, right? Going back to our California setting their the nation's first wealth tax. I'm not about getting rid of those things, but I'm just about making healthier food more accessible. And so if we're going to spend our money, we're living in the midst of this pandemic now where everybody has become a health expert and everybody is worried about their health. Let's acknowledge and understand that health is a daily choice, and we need to start advocating and making healthy choices available to more people. And whether that is coming up with creative ways to help pay for that fresh food and nutritious food to get to people that don't have access to it now, or whether that is coming up with creative ways to empower people that don't have access to or don't live nearby a grocery store to grow their own food by giving them the seeds and the education or the training to do it. Life happens in the daily choices, and it's microdosing, and then you get the result. It's, it just doesn't happen. It's the small decisions. And so all of that being said, getting back to the idea of health and feeling great and having vitality, it's a part of that renovation process, that where you're at and how you are right now is what you have to use energetically to think. And so you're inside this cycle that my willpower to make good decisions is affected by my current energy. And that's why faith and friends are so important, because sometimes they need to help you make a decision you can't make on your own that will lead to more energy, that will help you make a better decision with more energy on your own, right? And so
it can be a really hard cycle, though, that people feel stuck in, because it's almost like what came first, the chicken or the egg. Like in your example of, well, everybody should, if you're feeling terrible or not, but mostly if you're feeling terrible, you really need to get your hormone levels tested. If you don't have the money to do that, hustle. But these people feel terrible, and so hustling is pretty hard to do. And so it's just, or if you have low energy, maybe you don't have a great community of friends, because who wants to hang out with someone with low energy? So it just, I think people can often just feel so stuck.
Sure. No. Well, and that's the reality of it, and it comes back to that Chinese proverb. When is the best time to plant a tree? And the answer is 20 years ago. The next best time is today. And there is no easy fix to this, right? Like, there's no quick, easy fix to this. And a lot of what we're seeing, in the world today is a result of coming through the last 20 to 30 years where everybody was hyper focused on their opportunity to become the next Sam Walton or founder of Walmart, right? And to become rich. And in doing so, now we're having to come back and say, okay, having everything made in China doesn't really work, and it created a whole crazy amount of problems. We have yet to get there when it comes to loving our neighbor and putting their needs in front of ourselves. A lot of us have trouble seeing, kind of going back to that idea of renovation and resurrection. A lot of us have trouble seeing the value in putting the needs of our neighbor or the person on the other side of our community, across the river or whatever it is, putting their needs, elevating their needs, and making it our priority. We don't see the connectedness in that.
Okay, so talk about that in relation to the analogy of putting your mask on first.
Can you give me more?
Yeah, well, you were saying earlier in this episode about putting your mask on first. I'm not talking about like your COVID mask, but like caring for yourself first.
Sure.
And then we also talk about, I just want to parse out, because we talk about these things a lot. And so I just want to talk about them in relationship to one another.
Sure.
Of putting your mask on first versus putting other needs above your own.
Yeah. I think putting your mask on first, there has to be a why behind it, right? And it's like, let's get out of the airplane analogy and go to the truck that you own. I know you love trucks.
Yeah, okay. This is a great, this is already winning.
Yeah. If you don't take care of, right, if you don't change the oil, put gas in, clean your car, and do regular maintenance, you're never going to be able to use it to serve and meet the needs of others. And so even with self-care and putting my own mask on first and doing something crazy like testosterone pellets, there should be a why behind that. And the energy that I'm after and the vitality that I'm after should not be just so that I feel better, to make more money, or to have more influence with people. The why behind that should be, I'm already spending my life to try to influence others and give others as many opportunities as possible, which requires and takes real energy. And so if I don't invest in my own energy or keep my truck gassed up and the oil changed and the maintenance done and the tires rotated, then eventually my ability to take care of others and invest in others is going to break down, because I did not have the fundamental things in place with the right why behind them. And so I think one of the reasons why we don't live for putting others' needs, especially people that are different than us. Too many of us live in environments where all of our neighbors are just like us. Mm-hmm. And so your neighbor might be 15 miles away. Mm-hmm. Two of the reasons why we're not interested in taking care of our neighbor 15 miles away that has a different skin color than ours, or a different level of education or business experience, is because we're ran down from pursuing the American dream, which is, define it for yourself, but it often has to do with having enough wealth that you don't have to worry anymore, which is not true. Mm-hmm. That never happens. The more wealth you have, the more you worry is the typical standard. So not having that energy keeps us self-focused. And then number two, we end up struggling to put the other person's needs in front of our own, because we don't understand how that affects us in the midst of a community, how you could actually put your needs below another person and that benefit you more than if you put your own needs in front of everyone else's. And biologically, we are just wired to make a difference. That there is no biohack or testosterone pellet or anything out there that compares to making a difference in other people's lives, especially people you're not overly familiar with. And that has to have a good why to it also. You know, it can't be a savior complex. It needs to flow out of the right understanding with pure motives that we as human beings were created to meet the needs of other people. And, you know, what Jesus said was, if you want to be great, you must be the servant of all. If you give away your life, you'll find it. But if you try to find it, you'll lose it. And so I think that's the balance there, is learning more about who you are and how you are wired to meet the needs of other people. And then even in that, just arranging your life, you know, so that you are balanced and you're not trying to boil the ocean in one sitting, but you're just making little efforts each and every week to live outward focused when it comes to meeting the needs of others and having a sense of purpose.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I mean, I think it's just so easy to get on one end of the spectrum or the other, where you're completely depleted running after people to meet their needs. Or I've known people that use self-care as an excuse to not have to do something.
100%. And that's why it's so hard, because it requires balance at every single turn. Mm-hmm. There are people that are out there that are trying to meet the needs of others because they are insecure as F. And so them meeting the needs of other people is their way of medicating themselves to say, you are a good person. Mm-hmm. You do have a sense of purpose. Mm-hmm. We should operate out of who we are without the expectation of results to tell us a story about ourselves. Too many pastors are pastoring because of what it says to them about them when they meet the needs of others or are recognized and praised for their work.
Yeah.
You should be able to walk away from the good you do and the bad you do. The good you do and the bad you do should still not be your identity. The good that comes out of what you do and the bad, the mistakes that come out of what you do, is just a natural byproduct of who you are. And you're always trying to reform and get that better. But I am not my mistakes, and I'm not my wins either, right? I am who I am, and that comes out of my beliefs about my creator, the world, and why I'm here.
Yeah. Evie, our 2-year-old, sometimes she loves helping, and sometimes she'll take her little sister's binky, like pacifier, out of her mouth in order to give it back to her.
Yeah.
To be like the savior.
100%.
Here you go, sissy. And I'm like, you're the one that took it away from her.
Yeah.
But she likes that high so much of feeling like she's helping. Yeah. And I feel like that's not isolated for Evie.
Well, yeah. And I mean, that's a great analogy. And same thing from a political standpoint. Like what I saw last night, and I'm sure I'll see more of it next week with the Republicans convention, is, let me tell you why I am better and we are better than they are. Mm-hmm. And, all of us, to include politicians, have been given enough power outside of a public platform to make a difference every day in people's lives. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to the balance between, self-care and being outward focused, it really comes down to, I do self-care for the right reason. But if you don't do self-care, you're not going to have the energy that you need to have in order to make other people and their needs your priority. And there's something amazing about it that happens when you start getting in tune and are led, how everything lines up and starts happening. And we talk about this often at Body Garage. One of the biggest things that makes the biggest difference when we work on people at Body Garage Dayton is freeing them from what we call ties, like ties, like you tie something to something else. We used to call them soul ties because that's the culture, that's the context, the narrative, the language that I came out of in the Christian world. It was called a soul tie.
Okay.
And now we've just transitioned to calling it a tie because it's not as spooky when you say a soul tie.
Yeah.
I started being aware of these things and interacting with them 20, 25 years ago and have probably helped, several thousand people get rid of these. But a tie is where two people are around each other during an energetic moment, during an important moment. And so when I first got started, the only tie or quote unquote soul tie that I was aware of is when you have sex with someone else, there is a soul tie there. And we're told about this just very briefly in the Bible that when two individuals have sex, there's a covenant, a blood covenant that they enter into. Now, when you think about when this was being written thousands of years ago, without the medical knowledge that we have today, it makes sense as to why they would talk about it the way that they would. And it's funny how God has limited himself to humanity's ability to describe his behaviors and greater realities, knowing that they would blossom and manifest in greater ways, deeper ways, richer ways, brighter ways, more visible ways is what I'm trying to say, as time moves on and we become more like God as mankind is reunited primarily through communication via the internet, right? That we now understand more about the human spirit and that we are eternal, energetic beings that live forever. And this time on earth where we have this life suit or skin suit is just so small, right? Or so short. And so, when I first started working with soul ties or ties, it was primarily between individuals that had sex and there was this energetic bond, which, when a mother breastfeeds her child, cortisol and other binding hormones are released for them to start building a bond together. And that's how God made us, that if we really are energy, God created ways for that energy to become one energy. And so when two people are making love and the creator's advice is for two people to get together and stay together and for two people not to make love until they determine that they are going to be together forever, that's not because God just wants to tell people what to do. And that's the old way of interpreting it, or it's the lazy way of interpreting it, is God just wants to enforce his agenda on everybody. I don't like it. I'm going to make my own decision. The reason why the Bible advocates, and therefore God advocates, not to have sex until you're married is because of the bonding of the energies of the two people that become one. And God doesn't care if you have sex with somebody outside of marriage. Like that's his priority is not just to tell you don't do that because he has an opinion about it. He knows what's best for you as your creator and knows that when you do that, you are going to have a tie, what we used to call a soul tie with them, that when you stop dating them or being with them and you go on to the next person, that energetic bond is still there. And that energetic bond builds a bridge of realities of their energy and their ancestry and their DNA into the life of that other person. So then you get into a situation where someone has had dozens or, maybe not dozens, some people have, or even hundreds of partners. You are one energetic mess because your thoughts are not always your thoughts. There is still an energetic bridge that is tied between you and the person, even if they live on the other side of the world, where their energy is still making it into your life. I said on an episode a couple of weeks ago about the Japanese scientist that took an atom, split it, took half of it to space and started moving it with nanotechnology, and the half that was divided that was left here on Earth started spinning at the same time because it was mirroring the other atom. This is true when it comes to ties. And so over at Body Garage, one of the things that we do, and I just, had 2 sessions this past week where I helped someone through this. She had been raised in poverty, broken relationships, drug abuse, all of the things. She had been tied to dozens and dozens of men who had been tied to dozens and dozens of other women who had been tied to dozens and dozens of men. Yeah. And so you can't get free because you live inside of your own prison cell with other people's thoughts, other people's motives, other people's generational baggage, and you are just weighed down, and the body begins to break down under all of that weight. Yeah. And it's a tie.
So you said earlier that this is traditionally you've known it as somebody that you've slept with, but it doesn't have to be that.
No. I learned that about 10 years ago, or I noticed it about 10 years ago when the church was 12 years ago, actually, when the church was just getting started, and friends of ours who had come to the church lost their 3-year-old to a tragic accident. And some of the moms that had children the same age of this other mom in the church and came around her and just went through the whole horrible disaster with this mom and with this family, developed a soul tie with her. Yeah. And next thing you know, some of these mothers started living in chronic fear and anxiety of losing their own children. Sure. Why? Because they came so beside that individual that they had a tie. They formed a tie and a bridge into each other's life. And now her worries and anxiety became theirs. And how do you combat it? If you're not already tied, how do you keep yourself from getting tied? Similar to what we started off talking about with watching the Democratic convention. You don't allow someone else's intentional or unintentional fears or motives or what they're using to try to move you get to your heart. You acknowledge that, Michelle Obama put out a very passionate cry along with some of the other speakers last night. And they purposely write these speeches to try to get to your heart because your heart moves your feet before your feet often move your heart. And so, the mature person that's familiar with energy says, okay, I understand that she has a purpose here, and her purpose is try to motivate people to action. I can acknowledge and hear what she's saying without fully opening up my heart to become like to be hit with a splinter or an arrow to where now I'm in fear. How do you know if that happened? You're getting angry at the TV, or you're getting angry at the other party, and you're losing sleep, or you don't have your peace anymore. And so we just learned, and we've learned over time, that ties can come from things other than just having sex with someone else, where you go through a very emotional situation with someone else and you form that bond. This has happened in my past where I had to guard because, being in the church and working in the poverty alleviation community, you can hear these horrible stories and where other people are getting abused, and it just literally fires you up, and it makes you hurt and it makes you angry. I think of one situation where a young man who had a history of maybe forcing himself on younger women is not the right word, but that's how it came out, right? That he took advantage of women, and often younger than him, and drugs would be involved or alcohol would be involved. And I can remember this happening in the poverty alleviation community, and I had to be aware of the bond that could form between her and I, because I took up such an offense for this happening between her and him. Yeah. Right. And if you're not careful, her tragedy, because you do want to be moved by it, if you don't acknowledge that you could open up your heart all of the way and that become your offense, right? This is why we're not to be offended by it. You can build a bridge with that person that would lead you to getting in trouble with them and being tied to them, right? And
is every tie, I I don't know if the word negative is right.
No. I mean, the tie, again, getting back to the California set to pass the nation's first wealth tax, God creates everything to be good. And the greater the possibility for it being good and serving people, the greater the possibility for it doing damage. Alcohol. Alcohol can be a wonderful thing that obviously God gave us the ability to make. You can abuse it and take other people's lives because of it. If you use it with the wrong motive and for the wrong reasons and don't exercise self-control. Sex is the exact same thing. A tie is something that God made that evil tries to leverage and take advantage of. And so it's not uncommon that I walk into a situation when I see that someone can't get traction with their life, and no matter what they try, they just fall behind and no opportunities are coming their way. Often I know there is a tie there from a lot of negative people that have been in the same situation that are holding them down. Yeah. In this situation this past week, the moment, we took our first session and took about 45 minutes to break about, I would say, 30 different ties. And then I saw this person a couple days later and I said, how do you feel? And they're like, amazing. I have hope and optimism. I'm sleeping better. I feel lighter. Like I can't explain it because it's not a crazy process. We just walk and coach people through, learning to listen to their heart and letting their heart tell them or guide them to who or what do they have a tie to. And
then what? And then what do you do?
And then we give them the words to say to break that tie and to let it go. Yeah. Almost every time, I would just say, all right, Mallory, I'm going to ask you to listen to your heart, right? So it's not going to come from your head. It's going to come from below your throat. It's going to feel like a leading. I'm going to ask you to just repeat after me and say whatever name comes to mind. You don't have to understand the name because if you slept with, let's say, Steve, and Steve slept with Amber, you could get the name Amber, not know Amber, be familiar with Amber, and you just need to say Amber. And so the heart has the ability to tell us things that the head doesn't know. Again, one of the great detriments in American society today is we think that the head has to know it or understand it for it to be a reality. Yeah. When the truth of the matter is the body knows more than the head knows, and the body needs to inform the head, and the head can inform the mouth, and we can acknowledge these things. So I would just say something like, all right, I'm going to say a phrase, Mallory, and I want you to repeat it after me, right? I'm going to make it easy for you. I'm going to guide you. I just want you to repeat it. And when you hear a name, I want you to say it. So I, Mallory Redmond, renounce a tie with, and then I will wait and I'll let silence go. And then you hear something in your gut and you just say it, Steve. And then I'll say it again. I, Mallory Redmond, renounce a tie with, and then just listen. And, a lot of times there are ties with our mom, our dad, certain siblings, because we went through a traumatic situation with them. And we came, no different than sex being a good thing that can be turned bad. I put too much emphasis, or mom positioned me in a way to make her too much of my hero, or dad positioned me, and this happens in the Christian home a lot, too much to where I depended upon him. And when he let me down, that became a negative tie between him and I. And so often some of the motion mechanics at Body Garage have to call out the names for the person because I can hear them. When your heart speaks, often I can hear them just as well, if not better than you can, because it's your forest that you're in and way too familiar with. And so someone will hear I'll never forget the first time that I was walking one of these mothers through the situation with the tie thing, going back to the accident, the tragic accident. And I heard the other mother's name. And I'm like, oh, wow. I wonder if she had sexual feelings for her or was attracted to, her. And I'm like, hold on a second. This isn't just about sex. And that started my education that she had just been through a high energy situation with her. Yeah. And so, I will consult for people over the phone, and I can typically tell them names, and they come back and they're like, oh my gosh, you must be a psychic. Like, you said Dave, and Dave is the guy that, put his hand up my shirt in high school that I just froze. I was too scared to tell him to stop. Right. And like, how did you know that? And the truth of the matter is, like, the body holds energy. The body is nothing but energy. And so when those things happen, because Dave is associated with a triggering event, his name becomes interwoven with that cortisol and those the adrenaline and testosterone and other hormones that get lodged in your body.
Yeah.
And so, getting back to this idea of renovation and resurrection and, remodeling, we were made to thrive. And often what we see when it comes to people not having the energy and the drive to really live into their sense of purpose, or to start that business to serve the needs of those around them and from the other community or the other side of the river or the other demographic, is because they are so unhealthy themselves. And so a lack of health leads to a lack of health, which leads to a lack of health. And it's also a penalty. One of the reasons that we are not living into or doing these things is because we've made healthcare primarily a physical thing with drugs. And so, food is our medicine, and health is a lot more than, when somebody's hurting, just giving them an anti-inflammatory or a cortisol or a cortisone shot to make them feel better. When you allow someone, and unfortunately there are too many situations where this is the case, when you allow someone who has only been trained by traditional medicine, which the textbooks often have been written by the pharmaceutical reps in the pharmaceutical industry, which points to using their pharmaceutical drugs to treat people. If your understanding or your approach to healthcare is an absence of pain, you're effed. And that comes back to that question, what makes a good day good? What makes a good day good is the absence of bad. Well, you're effed, because you have to experience resistance to get to that life, to get to that mountaintop. If what makes a good day good is not climbing any elevation, you're going to be in the ravine or the valley the rest of your life. Same thing with our health. Health is not defined by an absence of pain, right? Health is by everything thriving and moving and functioning at the right energetic levels that you are made to have. And all I'm saying is, part of why all we have looked to is an infectious disease expert to help us out of COVID, is because of how we are set up to process the body and to process health in one dimension versus all dimensions. Going back to that special episode last week, in our city alone, 6,000 kids that now have to do school from home, have no internet access, and on average eat less than one meal a day. Why? Because we process health primarily through one lens and one dimension. And there are hidden costs to all of this. And so you can't just make a person a machine to be treated where you just try to tweak things enough to get rid of the pain.
Okay, I'm going to bring it back to soul ties, because you were there, and then
bring it back to the ties, Mal.
You've gone to a different place.
Bring it back to the ties, Mal. Well, the point in that is just saying that getting into something like ties, that's probably one of the major reasons, and people are going to laugh at this, especially if you're the genius medical person that's listening to this and thinks that everything is treated with a drug. You're going to think I'm crazy, but the body produces a lot of inflammation when there's a pathogen in the body that it can't clear or get rid of. It's going to try to burn it up. What if you look hard enough and you study long enough, you can find that those can be emotional, psychological issues that trigger the body's healing responses. And so that's why I brought up soul ties and put it in that whole conversation.
So can you break them yourself, or do you have to have somebody with you or kind of guiding you?
I mean, I would say yes. The answer is you can break them yourself. You can try. And maybe I have given you enough information to do it yourself. And I would encourage you to try it yourself. Yeah. If you get stuck and need help, you can reach out to me. I have a phone number for you. You can just text me, which I never remember the phone number, which is the craziest thing. Wow. It's 937-303-4788. If you think you have a tie, which the large majority of people do, and you want to break it, which I promise you it will be life-changing, you can text me, 937-303-4788, and I will keep your situation private like I keep all the other situations private.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing.
So one more thing real quick before we wrap it up is, so I've done this with you before. I've had broken soul ties, or ties. And it's so interesting that I didn't know this is what we were going to talk about today, but was it Sunday night? Yesterday was Monday. Sunday night, I had a dream. So I had a very thick tie with an old boyfriend of mine. Yeah. And that was like the origin of us doing the breaking of ties, because it was this one I was just very aware of with him. Yeah. We'd known each other our entire lives. And so we broke it, and I felt, it really was life-changing for me. Like even physically, like my face looked different. But on Sunday night, I had a dream about him, and I haven't thought about him in a long time. Yeah. But he and his wife were in my dream, and in my dream they were in trouble, and it was very like distressing for me. So what I've thought about yesterday was like, I wonder what's going on with him that would make me dream about him in that way. 'Cause I believe that there's something happening. Sure. I don't know what it is, but what would you say to, like, what's happening?
Well, just because you break a soul tie with someone, if it's been there for 10 or 15 years, like in your case, it was there a long time. Yeah. It doesn't, initially you feel a drastic difference, but there are still trace remnants that have used the energetic realities of that tie to help you think the way you think. Like, and this is why God said, hey, watch yourself, right? And don't do this, because the energy that is used to form something in you today, because we're always being transformed, right? We're always growing new bones, new cells, shedding old cells. Mm-hmm. It takes a while for things to work themselves out of you, to have that energy worked out of you. And that's why, like, we're told to work out our salvation with fear and trembling, meaning like it doesn't go away completely right away, right? Sometimes it takes time for that to happen, and you're just overly familiar. His energy became your energy for a very long time. They were synonymous. Yeah.
So do you continue like actively breaking it, or you just kind of...
If you're led to. Yeah. You know what I mean? If you're led to, you can, but it's nothing to be alarmed over. Yeah. Or worry about. Now, I have watched people, after energy has been broken, that energy wants to circulate or revolve around them. It wants to. Separation is something that we were not made for, right? Period. Prior to the fall of mankind in the Garden of Eden, we were not made for separation, so we don't do it well. Mm-hmm. And so when that energy is broken from you, it wants to come back and be a part of its habitat that it has been for such a long time, right? And so often, like, that could manifest in a thought, an energetic thought that I've watched people basically create that soul tie again and open themselves up to it, like through masturbation, that they're going to have a high. They think of this person, they've been set free from this person, a thought comes across their mind, or a certain smell triggers, a certain event or something that happened in the past. And now they want to masturbate because they had a high sexual experience with that person around that city, the smell of that food or whatever it was. And next thing you know, that bridge has been reconnected again. Right. And it's nothing to live in fear of, but it is a reality that you can build ties with people. Like, you can have ties to a certain porn actress, because you're watching her or him and masturbating to that as if you are there. So you're closing your eyes, putting yourself in that position, listening to their voice. Their voice is energy. Their body is energy, right? And that's all like stitching this relationship together. Saying that we weren't made for separation. I have never met an adopted child that did not have an orphan spirit. Never. And I've interacted with dozens, and it's because they were separated when we were not made for separation. And until they acknowledge that and someone helps them understand that there is a process that they have to work through, which is like forgiveness and the breaking of unhealthy ties, and letting that person's stuff in that situation that caused the adoption in the first place, acknowledging it and letting it be what it is. A lot of those with an orphan spirit, and I just named it that after dealing with it for years, spend a lot of their life doing things to reinforce the idea of their value. My grandfather was one of these people. I've told the story before that he was left on a doorstep in Jamestown, New York, literally, right? Like on a doorstep, like picnic basket thing.
Like a random person? They didn't.
They had some idea of his adopted parents being a Christian couple that cared about others or that demonstrated their care for the community. And he was left on a doorstep. And, he spent the rest of his life showing, and he didn't necessarily know this. He and I had a lot of conversations about this in hindsight. He spent a lot of the rest of his life doing things to show himself that they made a mistake. Right? I'm going to show you that you made a mistake in giving me up and pushing me across that line, saying that I didn't belong or that I was not valuable enough to be kept.
So is that something that you have struggled with? You were not adopted, but right. Proving your value or your worth because of your tie to him?
It's definitely in my DNA, right? You can't get away from it. And again, this is, 20 years from now, if we're all still here, this is it. And it's already started to become a huge part of medicine, where we're doing better at asking people about their parents and their grandparents, because these energetic realities have real, ramifications. Yeah. And so there's no doubt that I would have things in me from my grandfather on my mother's side where what I do proves my value.
And is it possible to break that from going into your children, or is that something that they're just going to you're going to have to help them?
No, we call it a generational shock absorber, that I have an opportunity to live my life based on my beliefs, and in doing so, be a generational shock absorber, where I don't know that I can necessarily protect them from all of it,
sure,
but I can take a lot of that load from them and say, well, here's what I was given, but just because it was given to me doesn't mean I have to give it to you.
Yeah.
And that's why living your life by your beliefs is so important versus your feelings, because your feelings are the super highway that transfer emotions into the next generation. Your beliefs can have feelings to them, but they, you need to view it as like a siphon or a filter that can filter things out when you live by your beliefs versus your feelings. Yeah. Because if one of my beliefs is I am unconditionally loved and accepted, then I don't have to prove my worth by how much I work or how much I take on.
Yep.
And I can still live a balanced life.
Yeah. Interesting stuff.
The real reason everything happens for a reason. So much of our life is happening for reasons we do not know. And we are passionate about unveiling those reasons so that we can actually get a hold of our life and do what we want to do with it.
I would like to remind people that if they have a question about this, to text that number.
937-303-4788. Ask us a question.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind, share this podcast. We would appreciate it. Until next time, episode 29, everyone.